This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Every Sunday evening for nearly 30 years, local airwaves filled with music from all over the world. The Vermont Public program All the Traditions was hosted by Robert Resnik, who died on Monday at the age of 72. Friends and family describe Robert as having an infectious enthusiasm for an incredibly diverse array of music. He always seemed to have a twinkle in his eye and a tap in his toe. Beyond hosting All the Traditions, he was a librarian at Fletcher Free Library in Burlington for nearly 30 years and a knowledgeable mushroom forager. No matter what subject he was focused on at any particular moment, Robert Resnik was observing, he was categorizing, and he was celebrating the world around him. In 2022, Robert won an award from the Vermont Arts Council. In a video the council made to honor him, he talked about what All the Traditions meant to him. He said the show was both a stroke of luck and his mission.
I think when you talk about music and the emotions that are brought by something as elemental as beating of your heart and how your memories go back beyond memory to music that somebody sang to you. And that's essentially what I'm doing on the radio. I'm doing show and tell in the broadest sense.
This hour, we would love it if you could help us honor Robert and his passion for music. Did you listen to All the Traditions on Sunday nights? What did you appreciate about Robert's hosting and music curation? You can give us a call this hour at 800-639-2211 or send us an email to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. We're joined today by two close friends of Robert Resnik. Mark Sustick of Fletcher is the founder of Young Traditions Vermont, which brings traditional music and dance to young people. He first met Robert in the 1970s. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you with us today. Joining us from Montpelier is the singer-songwriter Patty Casey. Patty, welcome.
Thank you.
And I am so sorry to both of you for the loss of your dear friend. I didn't know Robert personally, but I know him through his music and the stories that my colleagues have told me about him, and it is indeed a great loss. I'm hoping we can start the conversation today by hearing how each of you first met Robert. Mark, can we start with you?
Certainly. As best I can recall, I was at there was a music store on Pearl Street, and at first I thought it was Bailey's Music, but that was further down Church Street. But there was a music store there, and he was working there, and we got into a quick conversation about instruments, and which we continued to do over the years, over the decades. And I had an old Martin guitar that I said I would bring in, which I did later, and we talked about that a bit, about what it was and what could be done with it. And we continued, as I said, that conversation for many decades afterwards, talking about instruments, not necessarily that specific guitar.
And he played many, many instruments, yes?
He did, yes. Another thing we had in common, at least in terms of collecting lots of instruments, and he played them all. I remember he had a program that called, I might be wrong about this, but I think it was 60 instruments in 60 minutes.
Oh, wow.
He would play an instrument for a minute and then move to another one and another one. Somebody else might remember that more specifically, but I remember that happening.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yes.
Patty, how did you two first meet?
You know, I've been trying to remember when we very first met, and I don't know that I remember the exact moment. He's somebody that I've known for several decades as well. And I think I probably met him in the 1980s at the Champlain Valley Folk Festival, which was just a fantastic festival. It used to be at Kingsland Bay, which is right near where I grew up. And I think I'm remembering that I very, very first met him there before I was out in the world playing. And you know, he's just, as everyone has said, he just has had this infectious, warm, inclusive personality that, you know, everybody was attracted to. So I remember being at the festival with him and, talking. I play guitar, but I grew up playing flute and penny whistle and recorder. And so, talking to him about that because he, of course, played those as well. So you'd be hard pressed to find an instrumentalist in Vermont that didn't share some commonality with Robert in the instruments that we play.
So because he played so many different instruments, he could connect with so many different kinds of musicians and people here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you have a memory of Robert Resnik to share or just want to discuss what his program, All the Traditions, meant to you, please call in this hour at 800-639-2211. We've also received a number of lovely remembrances via email. Our email is vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Let me read a couple now. Nicandra writes, Robert made my life better every week, and I am so glad I told him that every time I saw him at a concert or festival. Most of the new music I've discovered over the last 30 years, I learned about through him. His life was too short, but the contribution he made was enormous and eternal. And Elizabeth in Charlotte writes, I was surprised to realize that it had been nearly 2 decades of Robert bringing joy and learning into my Sunday evenings. I often emailed him after a show to tell him how his choices uplifted me, and he always replied, like our greater community, I am sad, but what a legacy he has left us. We have Rose calling in now. Rose, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm so happy you're doing this show. I'm so sad to hear of Robert's passing, and I wanted to share that Sunday evenings were a super special time to me, especially during a certain period of my life where everyone else in my house wanted to watch football on Sunday nights, and I did not want to watch football, but I wanted to feel connected and to something, and I would go upstairs and fold my laundry and get ready for the week listening to All the Traditions, and it just was just the perfect thing to make me feel happy and connected. So I want to thank you all for that show so much.
Rose, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that All the Traditions was your alternate programming to Sunday Night Football. Mark, one of the things that I loved about listening to All the Traditions was that hearing Robert on air, I got the sense that the on-air version of Robert was pretty much the exact same as the in-person Robert. He was so congenial and friendly, and it felt like he was talking right to you. Is that sense correct?
Yes, I would say that's totally correct. He was a very easy person to talk to. Of course, it helped me and others he was friendly with that we had a lot of common interests. We liked the same artists. I already mentioned the instruments, particularly vintage instruments that we were interested in, and the variety. Recordings, of course, the recordings he would be featuring on his show, and maybe some new ones that I could turn him on to, and he was always very receptive to that.
Yeah.
He liked all kinds of genres. Anyway, all that helped in my situation to have that conversation with him, which was always easy and interesting and fun.
Did you ever find the topics of your conversations making their way on air into the subject of one of his All the Traditions shows?
That's a good question. I think there were some what we might refer to as unpronounceable names of individuals and groups and genres, and we would wrestle those down, and between the two of us, we'd come up with the right pronunciation, and he'd use those on the air.
Well, stay tuned, because in just a minute we're going to play a great example of one of
Okay,
those
great.
Robert moments. Patty, what was it like for you to have somebody who was such a close friend also be accessible on the airwaves every Sunday evening for decades? Do you feel like the Robert of the radio was the same as the Robert you knew and loved in person?
Absolutely. He could not be anything other than genuine. I mean, he just was himself, no matter what he was doing. I never saw any artifice or anything phony in him. He was just the most genuine person. He would give you like the biggest, most sincere hug. He looked in your eyes when he talked to you. he asked real questions and then actually listened. He was himself through and through, no matter where he was or what he was doing. And you could tell he just loved everything, pretty much everything. He loved, he was a sensual person in that he loved food. He loved to hug. He loved to listen to music. He loved beautiful things. He just really immersed himself in life, and you could see it in his face. He would get a rapturous look on his face, and anybody who knows him knows what I'm talking about, that little smile across his face. And oh my gosh, yeah, he was always himself. And he introduced me to a lot of new music, in addition to being just an incredible supporter of my music and all of us in Vermont and in New England.
Yes, he really helped nurture young and new musicians to the Vermont scene. Yes, Patty?
Yes, absolutely. He was, when I first started recording and performing out in the late 80s and early 1990s, he was one of the first people who really just sort of stepped up and made me feel like I could do it, and that, what I was writing was good, and that the recordings were worthy of a good review in the papers, and worthy of his show. And that really gave me a big boost over the years. It's been, a tremendous help to me. And it is, it's kind of crushy too for me to, over the years to listen to his show as it got, more and more widely played, and he had so many listeners. And I was like, I know him. He's my friend. It was just so cool that, to know him personally, and then to know him as a radio personality. But as I said, there wasn't a whole lot of distinction between the two.
Yeah. We received an email from Elliot and Joan in Plymouth who write, "We have been listening to Robert Resnik's All the Traditions regularly since we bought our home in Plymouth in 2008. Even when we weren't in Vermont, we streamed the show on Sunday evenings to feel connected to the peace and tranquility of our Vermont home. One of our favorite memories was a 2021 show featuring Passover music after a Zoom Seder. We wrote to thank Robert, and he kindly wrote back." We have Susanna in Middlebury calling in now. Susanna, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
For nearly 2 decades, Robert Resnik would come to the Burlington Quaker Meeting House in June and play a birthday music night for my brother. And anywhere from 20 to 50 people would gather, and the tradition became that each person would get to choose a song. And almost without fail, Robert could lead us in it with great delight, with inviting other people to join on their instruments, whatever their level of skill, and concluding with David Bowie's Space Oddity, an incredible rendition by Robert, and a rousing round of Happy Birthday. So all that infectious joy that you've described was very much present.
And you said that he did that every year for your brother? How did the two of them know each other?
I think through my brother's music teacher. My brother is a person with disabilities who's very active in the community, and he also knew Robert in his capacity as a librarian.
Susanna, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful memory and what Robert did for your family and the community there. We're remembering Robert Resnik, the longtime host of All the Traditions. He passed away earlier this week at the age of 72. We have Lydia in Burlington calling in now. Lydia, go ahead.
Hi, Michaela. Thank you. Robert was a longtime family friend of my father's, well before my father was my father. And the two of them would play, from what I hear from stories, rambunctious musical adventures throughout the city. And I hope that today, I hope they are playing somewhere together. But also more recently, in 2016, he was a JP for my husband and my wedding. So he gave a beautiful little speech and, of course, included some ukulele music and some accordion music during our reception. And it was just an absolutely beautiful, very personal and joyful event. And I just wanted to share that as one of a great many voices singing his praises today.
Thank you, Lydia. And I'm so sorry for your loss and to everyone who held Robert Resnik close. Mark, hearing these stories, it sounds like one of the through lines is that Robert really brought community together through music, not just on the radio, but in person at birthday parties and
Hmm.
weddings, family celebrations. I imagine you attended many of those too.
Yes. Robert had a staggering ability or scope of what he could do. There was Susanna's comment made me remember that I've filled in for him a few times. He'd say, well, I have this regular thing and I go to this place and we do songs, usually from Rise Up Singing, which is a kind of a sing-along book that Sing Out put out decades ago. So you just pick a song in there and everybody would do it. I wasn't as adept at this particular group as Robert was, and he had done probably all the songs in the book. And some people would shout out, they say, oh, I want to do whatever. And I'd say, well, I haven't done that in a really long time. And they said, oh, we can do it. And they knew it because Robert had done it with them so many times. So it was he had quite an impact. I think one of the things that's kind of a thread, it's a thread for me because I pay attention to it, but also Robert as an illustration of it, is that whatever you want to call it, folk music or traditional music or roots music, whatever, you receive it somehow, you hear it and you take it and you use it and then you pass it along. And I think Robert is the best illustration of that I can think of pulling from a wide range of genres and places and making it his own, finding himself in it, showing it to others so they can find themselves, and then you pass it on to somebody else. And that particular experience was clear to me that process was in full force. I think now that Robert's gone, his contributions in that way and so many other ways will continue.
The broad range of genres that he pulled from came up in many of the emails that we received from listeners ahead of today's show. Eric in Milton writes, my lineage is French-Canadian, and I enjoy hearing the music of the Quebecois. Songs are powerful vehicles of emotion and transport me to my childhood visits at my grandparents' house in the eastern townships. Mr. Resnick's love of the genre and extensive knowledge will be missed. And Marcus and Gabby write, we will miss Robert very much. As immigrants from Europe, the wide range of music he played and all the traditions made us feel very much at home. It opened windows to our past while also firmly grounding us here in Vermont. We would like to express our gratitude by saying, adieu, Robert, vila donc, which means thank you so, so much. If you knew Robert Resnik through his life as a musician or a librarian, call in and tell us how he impacted you. You can call us at 800-639-2211 or email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. We've received so many moving emails from you, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to read all of them during this program, but we will share all your remembrances on the show page for today's show on our website, vermontpublic.org. Now, we need to take one more short break. Before we do, let's listen to Robert Resnik on all of the traditions. This is from 2004.
A great band called Nuovo Agricola Associazione, and they are from Italy. And it was one of those bands that I read about in some European folk magazine and emailed them, and lo and behold, it came. The name of the album is Dalla Lente alla Serpegna, I believe. The name of the song, Aruguana e la Sulagna, I think. Well, who knows? Anyway, that was my closest. You'll have to read the liner notes in Italian. See, that's one of those problems with getting the real thing from over in Europe. If you don't speak the language, it leaves you in a lurch. I'm having a great time on this Sunday. You're listening to All the Traditions on Vermont Public Radio.
And this is Vermont Edition. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to Vermont Edition, where support comes from Wendell's Furniture, home of wendellsdeals.com, offering furniture designed for a range of budgets, in stock and ready for summer. wendellsdeals.com. And Vermont Construction's roofing division, offering roof installation and repair with free estimates on asphalt and standing seam metal roofs. Now serving all of Vermont and northern New York. More at vtroofing.com.
Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. This hour, we are remembering Robert Resnik. He was a local librarian, musician, and longtime host of the Vermont Public music program, All the Traditions. Robert passed away earlier this week, and he is survived by his wife, Maureen, and his two sons, Ben and Max. My colleague, Nina Keck, recently spoke to Max about his father.
He saw it as a duty and an obligation and a real joy to be able to bring music from so many different parts of the world to lovers and listeners of music here in Vermont and over the airwaves and through the internet as well. From when we were kids through all of the wonderful years at Vermont Public, we listened to his show. We have CDs and CDs worth of archives of going back to the 90s of that radio show and radio program, and being a DJ and being able to share music, to share stories, to share food was one of the things that my dad loved more than anything else.
Robert was beloved among Vermont Public staff. A couple of his colleagues sent us these remembrances. You'll hear Ty Robertson, James Stewart, John Ahrens, and Kari Anderson.
I'm Ty Robertson. I started my career at VPR in 1997, back when Robert used to broadcast All the Traditions live on Sunday afternoons. I got to sit in the on-air studio with him and keep track of the playlist and just delight in his company. It wasn't too long after that he learned my name really isn't Ty. My real name is Harriet. And so for years after, he would greet me singing, "All the cowboys want to marry Harriet. Harriet's handy with a lariat. But Harriet doesn't want to marry yet because she's having too much fun." And then I would get a big hug. Love you, Robert.
Whenever I'm out in the woods, out hiking, and I see a mushroom, I think of Robert. Because I know he'd be able to tell me exactly what kind it was, whether it was edible, and how I could prepare it if I wanted to. And I can see his face lighting up just talking about mushrooms.
I didn't know Robert personally at all, but I did musically in a way that I don't find kinship with a lot of other people. I'm a traditional folk fan, world music fan, and ever since I started working at Vermont Public about a year ago, every time I would go into our cafeteria, our music stream would be playing. So anytime I would go and get my coffee or see if there were any free snacks that I shouldn't eat but will, I would always, in the corner of my ear, hear some kind of music that I love or that I should love, and it would always surprise me. I'd say, oh my gosh, are we hearing Ann Briggs right now? Are we hearing Bert Jansch? These sort of nerdy artists that I used to get made fun of for listening to. And it was always All the Traditions, and it was always a very cool moment to be able to work somewhere and with somebody whose taste matched up with mine, and in a world where, it can be hard to connect with people, I connected with him in that way. And, who else would devote an entire show's theme to specific guitar tunings? A true pleasure for dorks like me, and I'm sure other people around the state just really appreciated the depth with which he explored music and the excitement with which he presented it to the people of our state. So he will be greatly missed, and R.I.P. Robert.
I've worked with Robert for 13 years, and we've lost an absolute giant in so many ways. One of my favorite Robert moments was we were doing a little piece on mushroom hunting and foraging, and he said that when you're coming up against a dead end, one of the best things to do is pretend like you're going to leave.
Another good trick, is to say, I don't think there's any mushrooms here. I'm going home. And sometimes they'll just appear.
We'll miss you terribly, Robert.
Joining me this hour are two of Robert's close friends, Patty Casey, a Montpelier-based singer-songwriter, and Mark Sustick, the founder of Young Traditions Vermont, which brings traditional music and dance to young people in our region. Patty, hearing those stories about your friend, I'm wondering if they bring up any memories for you.
They do, a lot of memories. And, one of the things I was thinking about this morning, knowing that I was going to be coming in and helping celebrate Robert's life and legacy was, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to cover everything because he's just too big of a personality for one person to capture all that he's given, Vermont and New England and really around the world. And he touched so many people in so many ways that, I had to really just kind of pull it back and think, what was he to me just as a friend? And I just keep coming back to how genuinely he related to people, whether it was, on the radio or whether it was in person. And the people, I had the good fortune of being a deputized Highland Weaver for a few years. Robert had a band with Marty Morrissey, another very dear friend of mine, and a hiking partner of mine for many years, and Tim Whitford. And they, they were the Highland Weavers. They played all over. Everybody knew who they were. And as Tim, had some health issues later in life, they pulled me in several times. And it was just, to be part of the orbit around Robert at any given time was just so much fun. I remember them taking me out to eat before our first gig as when I was a little Highland Weaverette. And we went to a restaurant in Burlington, an Asian restaurant, and he introduced me to pho, which I had never really had before. And he, just like, you've got to try this. And he asked for every imaginable additive from the people, the wait person. I wanted to try all of these. I wanted to taste everything that you can possibly put in it. And, that was him. He was just like, he crammed so much into his life. I mean, there was so much that he was able to absorb. And one thing that always blew me away was he had an incredible capacity to remember stuff. And, as somebody who now, I leave the room and go to another room and, I can't remember why was I here? And, forgetting things. And, he remembered, songs and lyrics, and you could, say something sort of obscure, and he'd go, oh, I know something about that. And so he just had so many touch points with people that, I feel like any one of us could come in here and talk about Robert for a really long time just because he did connect with so many people on so many different levels.
And had a true librarian's mind, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mark, hearing Patty talk and share these stories of Robert's joy, this inherent joy he found in so much of the world, I was also thinking about how he also had to face his fair share of suffering, including the Parkinson's disease that he struggled with for many years. I'm wondering if you have any memories of Robert talking about or working through one of those more difficult times and what you learned about his approach to life through that struggle.
I didn't really. The only thing I can think of is that I've been presenting events for a long time, Champlain Valley Festival and concerts since 1980. And Robert would often be, I would often ask Robert, particularly if I knew that he was interested in the performer, to do the introductions. And when Parkinson's came on the scene, I would always be aware of, because I taught at UVM and taught early childhood, special education and regular education, and accessibility is an issue. So I was always particularly sensitive to that, whether it was Robert or somebody else, somebody in the audience.
Yeah.
And I would always ask Robert about, should we have you enter from the stage level so you didn't have to go up the steps and that sort of thing. He never really said yes, I want, that's what I need, or he would ask me for stairs or assistance or whatever. He'd always figure out a way to do it. Um, and that was that, and he would do it. He would do it beautifully. And most recently, one of the first things that we talked about was our interests in certain kinds or certain performers in particular. And Martin Carthy came up very, very quickly in our association. And I had the chance to got a hold of, or somebody got a hold of me about having Martin come back to Vermont. Martin is now 85, maybe 86 years old, and it was probably the last time we were going to be able to see him in Vermont, and we were able to make that happen. I talked to Robert right from the get-go, and he was thoroughly excited, just like I was, and that's why I contacted him. And he came and did the introduction for Martins. He was just 2 months ago, and because we were thinking that, okay, this is our last chance to be in the same room with this incredible musician, this incredibly influential musician to us personally and to other people. Martin Carthy taught Bob Dylan material, and he taught Paul Simon material, and so he had that influence as well as a profound influence on traditional and folk music. But again, asked Robert, what would you introduce him, and how do you want to do that? Do you want to do it? Do you want to? There are steps up to the stage. Is that going to work? And he said, no, that's all right. We'll figure it out. And he introduced them from the table that he was sitting at in front of the stage. And that was just, it wasn't going to. I had a son who passed away a number of years ago, and it reminded me of that. He did not want to be. My son did not. I recognized this, and in Robert, he did not want to be identified by the disease. He wanted to be identified for what he was interested in and just continuing as long as he could on that sort of thing. So that's what comes to mind for me about the disability part.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I feel like I can see it in my mind's eye as well.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the phones. We have a number of people calling in, and I'll ask you to, if you can, keep your comments relatively brief as we don't have too much time left in this segment, unfortunately. We have Greg over in Quebec calling in. Greg, go ahead.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi.
Michaela?
Yes, can you hear us?
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear us, Greg?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for taking my call, Michaela.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I first heard Robert Resnik's program, I guess about maybe 3-4 years ago, because I'm recently new to the Eastern Townships, I was just blown away. It was music that I love, and especially when he touched into Acadian music, Cajun music, and Quebecois music. I spent quite a few years in the Maritimes, and I sang as a folk singer in both New Brunswick and in Quebec, and it really touched me. And earlier when you played the little excerpt of him talking there, I just choked all of just hearing his voice and thinking that we're not going to hear that anymore.
Thank you so much, Greg, for calling in. Yes, we'll all be missing his voice on our airwaves. Audrey is calling from New York. Audrey, what are your memories of Robert?
Hi. First, I want to send my condolences to his family and his dear friends. It's a big loss. My husband and I were sitting at the table, and when it was announced the other night, it was just a shock to us because we didn't know he was sick. We just know him from the radio, and it's 9 o'clock. He always would say the hour, just so happy. And we live off the grid, so we are avid radio listeners because I don't use a computer or cell phones, and the radio is a big part of our life. And he was a big part of my Sunday nights and many years before, because it's been so many years, and we will just miss him so much. And thank you for this show, and we will miss him. He was a dear, wonderful person to listen to, and such a great variety of music he would play. And I don't get to hear what's new out there, and I always got to hear the new stuff through him, and life won't be the same. So thank you for taking my call, and good luck with the public radio and TV.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you for sharing what Robert Resnik meant to you. And we have Susan in Wilmington who's called in as well. Susan, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Yes, it was such a shock to hear of his passing. And I guess I'm so grateful that he was able to do the show right up until the end. And I probably listened to him for 30 years regularly as a Sunday night tradition. And it's going to be something I really miss. I hope that you will continue to do replays of his show, at least for a while. I really enjoyed the seafaring songs, the artists out of Quebec and the Maritimes, and the introduction to new traditionalists and new folk artists. So I remember seeing him emceeing at Lake Champlain Folk Festival on Kingsland Bay. Yeah, he was an influential musician in our Vermont, New England community. He'll be very, very much missed, and my condolences to his family and loved ones.
Susan, thank you so much for those kind words. And thank you as well to our guests, Patty Casey and Mark Sestic, two close friends of Robert's who helped us remember him today. Patty, Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michaela.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Before we go to break, I want to share one more email with a remembrance of Robert Resnik. Dave from Middlesex writes, listening to Robert's show has been a Sunday evening tradition in our home for years. His deep knowledge of folk music, his humor, and his wide range of selections taught me a lot. Though we never met, he felt like an old friend. He will be deeply missed. Thank you to everyone for helping us celebrate the life of Robert Resnik, the longtime host of All the Traditions on Vermont Public. We will share more of your remembrances that you emailed to us on our website, vermontpublic.org. Coming up, we are going to share a bit of news from Bennington. It's marking the opening of a new treatment center for opioid use disorder. We're going to learn about what goes on inside in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. A new treatment hub for opioid use disorder is now open in Bennington. It's part of the state's network of sites and services for people who struggle with opioid use disorder. This new center will be the first place in southwest Vermont where people can access methadone. Here to tell us more is Kelly Doherty. She's Deputy Commissioner at the Vermont Department of Health. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Michaela.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. And listeners, we, of course, are glad to have you as well. And if you are in southern Vermont specifically, we would love to hear from you for this segment. Perhaps you or a loved one has received treatment for opioid use disorder, or maybe you have questions about who can access care at this new treatment hub in Bennington. You can call in at 800-639-2211 with your thoughts and your questions. Now, Kelly, this clinic plays a key role in Vermont's hub and spoke model of substance use treatment, which is organized around a number of different hubs or geographic regions. Can you give us a brief overview of how the hub and spoke model works?
Sure, absolutely. So we have 8 spokes now with Bennington within the state of Vermont, but we also usually include, there's a hub right across the border in West Lebanon, New Hampshire that many Vermonters access. So we usually say that there are 9. And so hubs are the only place where you can get methadone for the treatment of opioid use disorder. Methadone is highly regulated by the Drug Enforcement Agency at the federal level. And so you have to have certain, measures in place to be able to dispense methadone. So people who are in need of methadone or prefer methadone as their treatment of choice need to receive that at one of those 9 locations. Spokes, on the other hand, are primary care providers, other just sort of regular medical practices that have prescribers who can provide buprenorphine, which is another treatment for opioid use disorder. We have over 240 spokes throughout the state. So people who are accessing buprenorphine through a spoke, it's sort of just like when you and I go to our primary care provider and maybe get a prescription for a chronic illness. You go to the pharmacy, you pick it up, and that's that. So much more easily accessible than methadone, but methadone, works better for some people. So it's important that we have the access in the state for methadone within a reasonable geographic area.
Right. And people who are taking methadone, they need to take it every single day. So being
Yes.
geographically close to one of these hubs is very important. Before this center opened in Bennington, where were people in that area traveling to access methadone if they needed it?
Yeah, so most were traveling to North Adams, Massachusetts, but some were also traveling to Brattleboro or Rutland. And it is a huge barrier, even though North Adams is 30 to 40 minutes away. If people don't have reliable transportation, it can be a real barrier to get methadone, regardless of how far you need to travel if you don't have transportation. So we knew that there was a critical mass of people in the southwestern corner of the state that really needed the access to this treatment closer to home. So we've been working to open a hub in Bennington for several years. And so we are just thrilled that this is now open and people can access it. In fact, the grand opening and ribbon cutting was yesterday, and it was wonderful to see the support from the community.
And it was a long road to the center's opening. It officially
Yes.
opened last month, or the ribbon cutting was
Hmm.
yesterday. I think it took about 7 years, right? Soup to nuts to
That's correct.
open this center. And I know one of the biggest delays was in renovating the space. It used to be a Family Dollar store.
Mhm.
What else was behind the delays?
Yeah, so we have had three different providers who have cycled through the efforts of trying to open a hub in Bennington. And the first provider, just there wasn't space available that was adequate at the time. So they couldn't find space and, decided to drop out of the project. I would say one of the biggest delays was the COVID-19 pandemic. So that really just kind of put so many things on hold because healthcare providers were, focused on the pandemic, and our existing hub providers were just focused on making sure that people could still get their medication, during lockdowns and things like that. So we are working with BART, which is part of Baymark Health Services, and they operate other hubs in the region. And so they came in, I want to say about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and wanted to work with us to open this hub in Bennington. And it took a little while to find the space. And the renovations were actually, didn't take quite as long as we were expecting that they would. But those things just
I've
take
never heard that
time.
sentence said
I
in the
know,
state of
yes.
Vermont before.
Yes, yes. So, and there's because methadone is so highly regulated, there are certain inspections and other things that need to happen. The DEA needs to come and visit the site, make sure that there are appropriate security measures in place. And of course, there are local, permitting, things that they needed to go through. So we're just so thrilled that it's now open and available to people in the Bennington area.
And you mentioned that Baymark Health Services runs other hubs
Hmm.
that provide methadone in Vermont. Those are in
Yes,
Berlin, Newport, St. Albans, and St. Johnsbury. And there
correct.
are three other hubs in Vermont. Those are in Brattleboro, Rutland, and South Burlington.
Correct.
And Kelly, to zoom out a little bit here,
Hmm.
I remember last year that we got the good news that opioid overdoses fell in 2024 for a second year in a row. How
Hmm.
are those numbers looking so far for 2025?
So far this year, it seems that the decrease is holding. We look at those numbers frequently. One thing that's difficult is that it can sometimes take up to 3 months to get a death certificate because of toxicology testing and all of that.
And yes, I should
But so,
clarify, I meant fatal opioid overdoses, not
correct,
overdoses
yes,
altogether.
fatal.
Yes, continue.
Correct. Yeah, so it's looking, at least so far this year, that the trend is holding, which is great news. And, we've been very focused on overdose prevention for many years now. And we can't really point to one single intervention because we've been doing so many different things to prevent fatal overdoses. But we are optimistic that the decrease is going to hold for 2025, at least at this point.
Mm. Um, Burlington is also working on establishing a location and finalizing plans to open a overdose prevention center
Hmm.
in the city. What is the health department's role in that process, which was started by act of the legislature?
Correct. So our role was we needed to develop the operating guidelines for the opioid or for the overdose prevention center. So that was in the legislation that it was our responsibility to do that. And we needed to do that by mid-September of last year, which we did. The other responsibility that we have is that we need to provide the funding, which is coming from the opioid abatement funds, the settlement funds, to the city of Burlington for the planning and operation for that site. So we will be, in fact, the grant is in the works now. We'll be providing the funds to Burlington, and then we'll be responsible for just sort of monitoring. There'll be reporting requirements from the city, which will come from the operator of the actual overdose prevention site. So we'll be collecting data on, use of the site, demographics, types of substances that are being used, and other data points so that we can sort of evaluate the effectiveness of it and, the utilization.
Mm. And Kelly, if somebody listening right now needs support with opioid use disorder or knows somebody who does, what's the first place you would send people?
I would send people to VT HelpLink, which is a 24/7, 365 one-stop shop for all things substance use related in Vermont. So folks can go to the website, which is vthelplink.org, or they can text link, the word link, to 802-565-5465, or they can also call that number. And so that is for general information. It can be a loved one who's just concerned about their person, but you can also go on there and find treatment places and get connected to a provider from VT HelpLink. And the folks that answer that phone are all trained in this work and are there to help Vermonters access whatever resources they need around substance use.
Mm. And briefly, Kelly, to return to the Bennington Center for a moment here, since
Mhm.
you just brought up access, can people who do not have health insurance go there and receive treatment?
Yes. Yes. So we receive a block grant from the federal government, a substance use block grant. And part of what we use that for is to cover treatment for people who are uninsured or underinsured. So people without insurance can certainly go there. They are accepting sort of walk-ins for new patients to receive an intake. So folks can go there even if they haven't been connected to treatment before, which is wonderful, and access that treatment regardless of their insurance status. And one thing also that I'd like to say
It's
is
about
that
20 seconds here.
yes, yesterday at the opening, it was wonderful to see how many community members came out. One of our staff travels all over the country and talks to programs, and most of these programs in other places open sort of under the radar because they don't want people to know. Bennington came out in force yesterday, and it was so wonderful to see that support.
Kelly Doherty, Deputy Commissioner at the Vermont Department of Health, thank you so much for telling us about this new center in Bennington.
Thank you, Michaela.
A new treatment hub for opioid use disorder is now open in Bennington. That is all the time that we have for today's show. To read more about all the traditions host Robert Resnik, who we honored earlier this hour, you can go to vermontpublic.org. Today's show was directed by Aaliyah Papes. John Ahrens is our managing producer. Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro are our producers, and our intern is Callie Canuxerl. Today's call screener was Rick Barrett, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch up again soon.